So the other day I was walking by a Canada thistle plant and I saw that it really didn't look too great, right? It kind of looked kind of yellowish and anemic near the top of the plant. And upon closer inspection, I saw these insects that were hiding out in the leaf crevices and the bud region of these Canada thistle plants. And so that prompted some further research for me to find out what they were, and immediately one of the thoughts that went into my mind was, could this insect be used as a natural biocontrol agent for Canada thistle, or also called creeping thistle? Or are there some unintended consequences or certain drawbacks that might make these insects not a good idea? Thus the topic of today's video. Alright, so today I'm talking about the thistle weevil, and there are actually two types of species that I want to hit on today. And these two species are Lerinus planus and Rhinocylus conicus. Lerinus planus is usually referred to as the thistle bud weevil, and Rhinocylus has a common name as well, maybe the thistle head weevil or something. I don't remember the name right off the top of my head. So these two different weevils can look very similar to each other. In fact, I'm not entirely clear on how to tell them apart myself, but that doesn't really matter in this context, and we'll get into that in a bit. Usually the Lerinus planus may be somewhat smaller than the Rhinocylus conicus. Both of these insects are native to Europe, right? As is the Canada thistle, or the creeping thistle. Of course, right, it's you may hear Canada thistle and think it's from Canada, but it is in fact not native to Canada or even North America in general, and it has its origins actually in Europe and those areas, as do these two insects, right, which have been adapted over time to consume this plant, right, and they can effectively reduce its seed set and help to confine its spreading, right? This plant will still spread by, suckering and sending out roots, right? Vegetatively propagating itself, because it can have a quite immense network of roots underground, right? They can go multiple feet down into the ground and they can spread, and so that's an immense reserve of energy that this thistle plant can use to continue to grow and propagate itself, even when pulled up, and even when its seed set gets compromised, potentially by these insects or others. Years ago, it was thought that these two insects in North America could be used as a source of natural control for this, or biocontrol for this Canada thistle, right? And so the idea would be that people or farmers, especially like larger scale farmers, wouldn't have to worry about spraying this Canada thistle with an herbicide, and that they could actually use natural predators or natural herbivores in the form of these two weevil species to go after this Canada thistle plant, right? And you think like, oh well, we're not spraying herbicides or whatever, so this is probably better for the environment. It's going to be less negatively impactful. But what they found, as I have written here, is that these weevils can actually attack native thistle species, right, to North America. And some people may be tempted to think, even at that point, that it's still a good thing, because, thistles are spiny, they can poke people, they can physically detract people from being on the landscape, or, not walking barefoot outside, or they can crop up as a weed that can be painful literally to deal with in an agricultural setting, with weeding out a bed of whatever crop it may be, lettuce or cucumbers or whatever. But some of these native thistles, or pretty much all of these native species of thistles, of which there are multiple species, are actually very important ecologically to the landscape. They can be a great nectary for many different pollinating insects, and the seeds are a big food source for a lot of different birds, right? Especially like goldfinches and some of these other birds that have adapted to consume the seeds of some of these thistle species. So if you want to see more birds in an area, it's probably a good idea to grow more thistles, right? I know, like, I let some thistles grow in my garden, and the goldfinches are all over them. So it really makes me feel good to understand that, my garden can supply some natural bird seed that these birds are naturally attracted to. I don't have to buy bird seed or anything like that, but the ecology is functioning out there in the garden. So some of these non-native weevils that have been introduced and have been sold to different producers to control this Canada thistle have adapted to, prefer some of these other native thistles as well, to such a point that some of these thistle species may even risk extinction. Meanwhile, the Canada thistle is still growing abundantly across the landscape in North America. So we've realized that introducing a pest of the creeping thistle has actually not been very successful, and it's in fact backfired pretty badly, right? Not only is it not controlling this creeping thistle very effectively, but it is very effectively controlling some of our native species, in fact threatening possible extinction of some of them. So now the question becomes, well, how can we kind of work to remedy this challenge? On my garden scale, what I do is I pull up the Canada thistle, and so I try to harvest it especially before it flowers. And in some ways, you can look at it as like harvesting biomass. This may be good material for the compost, or some like chop and drop technique or something like that. And maybe after some time or years of continually pulling up this thistle in certain areas, it may or may not work to exhaust the root system. Because if you limit the photosynthetic potential of this plant, it will have to start using up more of its own reserves. But then, there's that task, seemingly maybe non-ending task, of continually pulling up these thistle plants and weeding them out routinely every few weeks to month or whatever during that growing season. So I'm not going to buy these weevils to do the work for me. And then secondly, are there any natural predators on that landscape that may work to control these weevils, right? Now that's going to be tricky because these weevils aren't native to North America. So finding predators that may specialize on these insects are also probably going to be few and far between, if any. Some generalist predators may be options, especially for rhinoceros, right? We might have some spiders that could potentially go after them, minute pirate bugs, true bugs such as like assassin bugs or wheel bugs, or even some other insects such as ants may especially go after some of the younger stages of these weevils, right? Assassin bugs may go after the adults, but again, we have to be cognizant of what time of year are some of these predators on the landscape versus when these weevils are pupating or in the larval stage or adult stage, and do those time frames line up? Also, how effective are these natural predators going to be in the face of an invasive pest such as these weevils? And are they not going to be able to keep pace with the reproductive rates of these weevils in a given landscape, especially if that landscape in particular is healthy and ecologically functional? Maybe there's a possibility of introducing, so then we have the possibility that maybe there is a natural predator or parasitoid of these weevils in their native habitat in Europe, right? And so that may work to control these weevils populations in there. And so some people may think, well, in North America, would introducing some sort of parasitoid or something like that help to control these two species? And it may, but there would have to be probably extensive testing to make sure, and it may be impossible to make sure 100% completely, that it won't go after natively occurring insects or cause ecological problems or imbalances from that, right? Because it may jump from its host of these weevils to a different species that is native to North America, which then might make that not a good idea too. So these are all kind of things that we have to consider as we move towards hopefully a solution to kind of reassert that natural balance. But in the meantime, I'm just going to continue to work to pull up the Canada thistle in my garden by hand, and continue to look for making observations of what other insects or arachnids or whatever may go after, may prey upon these thistle weevils. Thank you so much for checking out this video, and maybe now we know what these interesting looking insects are at the tops of thistle plants. And even though it may look like a good thing on the surface, right, where we have a natural insect controlling an invasive plant, at this point it's probably better to override that temptation and not use this insect as a source of biocontrol, at least not in North America. Where this insect is native, parts of Europe and other areas around the world, it may very well be a fantastic biocontrol option, because that insect and the native thistles in those areas are more likely to be better adapted to coexist. Whereas here in North America, our native thistles have not adapted to coexist with some of these thistle weevils, right? So, and that can be a bad thing, right? Especially because a lot of these native thistles can have very important ecological functions in these natural communities in North America. And disrupting that can cause some issues and domino effects down the line. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.